I've been going back and forth for a long time about whether or not I wanted to talk about this because it's so personal to me. And for those of you who have listened to some of my other videos, you'll know that I grew up in a particularly bad family. And I didn't really know whether or not I wanted to discuss this because I wasn't sure about whether the context was just my own and personal to me, or if this was something that more people experience than I even think. On Twitter recently, there has been a battle over food and restaurants and spending, in which millennials and Zoomers have been yelling at boomers about the fact that boomers are actively gaslighting us into believing that the reason that they are so successful, the reason why they are established, is that they were stingy with their money enough that they saved it all and then invested in the markets and came out because they were these financial gurus. And this is obviously false. The reality is that these people paid less money than we do for the same things. That's it. That's really all it comes down to, and that's all that argument really is. It's a lot of these Zoomers and Millennials begging the Boomers to please stop lying to us about this. Truly, I think I've told the story before, but one of the biggest uh-oh moments that I had during COVID was when I was talking to my dad about how ridiculous it is that a house that you could buy for about $80,000 in 1965 has become $1.5 million by 2026. And he looked at me with total sincerity and he goes, well, yeah, I mean, that's a difference of 40 years. And I can't remember if he made that mistake or if I made the mistake. But I think he might be along with us all thinking that it's actually still like 2000 and not 2026. But the point of that story is that ultimately these boomers all believe that by right everything you buy should in fact become more expensive. That everything you buy, in other words, is an investment. And I've talked in other videos about how that word investment is easily one of the most destructive that has ever been visited upon the white middle class in America's history. Easily. Boomers spent an insane amount of money on things and called them all investments. And it was almost like a magic talisman. The second that you said it, it just cleared away all the debris of life. Everything became one with the universe when you said, "Oh, that's okay. This is an investment." When you think about it, and it didn't matter how stupid it was. It didn't matter how stupid it was. But what I wanted to talk about wasn't just the argument on Twitter, because the argument on Twitter was really interesting, and there were good points made. Not from the boomers. I don't think I saw a single point made by the boomers that I liked, except now that I'm thinking about it, there are always, and I should say this at the beginning of this video, there are always going to be stupid people who buy things at ridiculous prices. And unfortunately, I am mad at those people as well because unfortunately, they're the reason why the market is so screwed up in everything. These people will not stop buying. They won't. Okay? I wish that when I went out to a store or a restaurant, that all I saw was boomers so that we could blame them. The reality is that there are plenty of people who are screwing up the market pricing because they're just loading all this stuff onto credit cards. It's not most people, though, okay? The reality is that this sort of Caleb Hammer-esque going after people who are overspending and being crazy is not helpful to the discussion, okay? There are those people in every generation all the time. There is a lowest common denominator. Yes, there is. There is. Sorry. And these people are idiots. These people deserve nothing. They're scumbags. If you are the kind of moron who, with a job or not, is paying $40 to get a boba delivered to you because you like the fact that, like, it makes you feel like a Roman emperor or something, yeah, you're a moron. Okay? Like, that's really all that discussion should be, but it became so much more than that so quickly because boomers just couldn't help themselves, and they stepped in and they started talking about food and how they lived. And again, did some of them do this? Perhaps they did. If we audited their life, though, would we find spending, ridiculous amounts of spending and silly spending in other places? 100% we would. 100%. That guy who keeps claiming, and there were many of them on Twitter, that they go out and had a white bread and plain turkey sandwich with some mayo or something, a bag of chips, if that, and a cup of tap water for lunch, was honest, they would also have to explain to you that actually, well, then there was the 2 6-packs of beer that I sank into my gut every night. These people, like, you have to wonder how many cigarettes he would have, right? Or gambling. These people were gamblers. Like, a lot of these people were just spending money like it was Christmas all the time. Or they had some motorcycle that they built, or they look at Harley Davidson. Look at how popular Harley Davidson was, and joyriding around the country was. RVs, boats. Nobody has this stuff anymore, man. Every one of these industries is dying. Why do you think that is? Boomers. And so what it became very clear to me, and this has been the theme of the last few videos that I've been doing, I think, is when you see a pattern and you cannot figure out why it is that someone is being as stupid as they are, you have to always ask yourself the same question. Is this on purpose? And in this case, I do believe it is. And that's why I'm going to talk a little bit more about this today than originally I ever was going to. Because a lot of these are personal stories. And I didn't want to sound whiny. I didn't want to be depressing. But I think that a lot of us probably dealt with this far more than I thought. And so I am going to share my thoughts about boomers and the talisman of food. One of the first things that you learn about abusive parents, if you ever study psychology, is that the very first thing that they control is food. The very severe cases of this is when you have a lock on the refrigerator or locks on the pantry. That is so that the parent can actually parcel out food, particularly when it comes to rewarding systems. So if, they effectively are saying, you don't get to eat unless I deem it appropriate. And those are very extreme cases because your average abusive parent doesn't do that because it would be too obvious. It's so evil and it's so obvious that you would never, you as a narcissist don't want to believe that you're actually a bad person. In fact, so much of narcissism is based around the idea that you are a perfect person. So you don't do stuff like that necessarily. But food was a major control factor for boomers, constantly. And it was there was this bizarre need that they had to oversee everything that was done in the kitchen. And I noticed this across families, which was very strange. Good families, and there were some, good families would not do this. So this was your classic, Kid comes home from school, goes direct to the refrigerator, pulls out the juice bottle, drinks straight from the bottle. Kevin, don't do that. Here, that's gross, blah, blah, blah. Hi, mom. Like that's that sort of movie-esque normal family stuff. Um, in too many cases, boomers would not allow stuff like that. Certainly not without them being there. This is where we got the concept of the helicopter parent, actually, and many of the so-called helicopter parents didn't believe themselves to be helicopter parents. They believed that they were the opposite. But when you really got down to the psychology of it, the reason that they thought they weren't helicopter parents was because they were so mean and so vicious that they thought that by hurting their children, they were actually teaching them to be tougher. And helicopter parents, in their mind, were creating soft kids. So since their kids weren't soft, they were not helicopter parents. If that was hard to follow, it is. It is. But I said it right. that's actually the psychology of that. It's in my household. I could not get up and go to the refrigerator or the pantry or the kitchen without someone following me. This is hard to explain to people now. I think I've tried to explain this before, and no one could figure out why. But the answer is obvious. It was about control, and they would stand there, and what they would do is they would actually make bizarre, angry, passive aggressive comments as you made a snack. And it didn't matter how thin I was extremely thin. I was actually, I ate so little as a kid that the big complaint that my parents had about me for a very long time was that I was so hard to feed. We'll get into that later, but the reality was that I was being fed very badly. And when you're fed bad food, there is a threshold at which you will choose starvation over bad food. Speaking of bad food, when I did go to the kitchen, it was often a hoard of food. It was never a fresh pantry full of food, of delicious, delightful treats. It was often moldy, it was gross, and it was old. It was what my parents would do, actually, is they would go to a restaurant. And because they had to make it okay in their head that they went to this restaurant by themselves while like we were in school or something, they would come home with styrofoam clamshells full of some dinner that no one was going to eat. And I'm telling this story not just to gross you out, but because this is a really bizarre aspect of boomerism that's very hard to explain to people, where they would sabotage the thing that they were doing on top of doing that thing because what they were doing was wrong to begin with. My parents should not have been at these restaurants to begin with. That's the truth. They were being wasteful. They were they were just spending, and they were eating. They were eating every dollar that we had as a family. And they would go and enjoy these unbelievable, lavish meals. Now, the thing is, sometimes they took us with them, and if it was the weekend or something like that, there was, they couldn't just say, like, we're not going. They brought us with. But we could not believe as kids how much time these people spent at these freaking diners. We used to spend hours at a diner on one meal, and it was this massive, disgusting Roman feast for brunch, right? We're talking like 11 to 1 or 11 to 2 p.m. where we're just sitting there, and they just keep ordering more food, and it was just so stupid. And something's wrong when the kids are like, hey, We don't need to do this every time, right? And that's something that the boomers like to do is waste our lives. They really did. They loved to waste our lives. They loved to waste our time. We always wanted to do other things, and then they would step in and say, no, 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 we're going to sit. We're going to sit around and we're going to just waste hour after hour after hour. That's what they were really doing. All these boomers, you have to remember that I'm talking about this Twitter war. All these boomers on Twitter who keep claiming that, like, I don't know, that you're supposed to just eat a couple of slices of white bread and a cup of tap water. If they're not lying, they're idiots. Because the reality is that boomers were so wealthy back then. We were not, by the way. We didn't have a lot of liquid cash at any given time. A lot of this was paid for eventually by windfalls because they were just throwing this stuff on their credit card. So that's the boomer life. That's what's real. But to get back to what the thought process is of this, not only are these people going to a diner and when they shouldn't, spending lavish amounts of money and time at this diner, they then feel bad. So now they have to fix it. But then they sabotage the fix because it would be one thing if they came home with like things that their children were going to enjoy, pancakes and French toast and whatever, sandwiches that we liked, burgers, whatever. It was never that. These idiots would come home with, I shit you not, liver and onions was their favorite thing to bring home. Liver and onions. And they would hold it up in their hand like they had gone out and claimed some kind of victory and brought home the spoils of war and say, we have food. We brought it back for you. Eat this. Eat it. And we go, what is that? And they would tell us, and the thing is, diner food does not keep well on a good day anyway. There are very few things that you can buy from a diner, put in the refrigerator, and eat and be satisfied by the next day even. But what was especially appalling was that they got really the worst food imaginable for that kind of thing. Liver and onions, of all the things that you could buy, is easily one of the worst meals, one of the worst combos of food items that you can put in a styrofoam box and keep in the fridge. And what ended up happening was nobody ate this stuff because nobody wanted it, including them, right? So again, now we have the guilt, we have the fix, the sabotage of the fix, and now what? We have the grand finale, which is rot, because that's what would happen. Our refrigerator smelled like death all the time. There was a point where we actually had to warn people when we were opening the fridge because it smelled so bad. And the reason for this was because not only would these boomers spend incredible lavish amounts of money and time away and out and living a life that they couldn't afford, they also would come home and then do nothing. It's not like they were fueling up for this grand life that they were building. They weren't enjoying the fruits of a hard-won victory at home. These people would just eat and then come home and sit. The TV would pop on, the books would come out, the Oprah would be playing in the afternoon. There was nothing that these people were doing with any of this grand amount of calories. So, least of all, of course, was the very disgusting problem of all of this rotted food in the refrigerator. And by the way, what do you think they wrote on these many boxes of styrofoam from these diners that they would go to? Just like, let's play a little bit of Jeopardy. If you are an idiot and a scumbag who is a saboteur of the fix that you have created. What do you write in Sharpie on the bag or the styrofoam box so that your kids know whether or not it's safe to eat the food that you brought home? I'll give you a few seconds. Now, some of you may have said the date. That's what an intelligent person would write. But these are dummies. So what they would write is new! Exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point. Eat. Circle the word eat. Circle it. You got to circle that. Oh, eat now. Eat this. Exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point. I cannot tell you how many times we got sick at my home due to what I now understand is rotten food. It was rotten food. It was an insane amount of dust that we used to have in our home. Our home was a hoarded out mess that I've always been planning on doing an entire episode on hoarding or a series on hoarding, because that really is, that has been the bane of my life for quite some time at this point, is the hoarding problem. And hoarding, by the way, the fact that all these boomers, because this is a very common thing that you see with boomers, hoarding wasn't just a problem of cheap stuff coming into the home, and these people buying like really, really cheap trinkets and then not wanting to throw them out. It was an ego problem in which these boomers were pulling in almost everything they saw, whether if it was cheap, if it was free, they bought it, they took it, sold $5 for this piece of furniture, $70 for a chair that should be $400, whatever. It was getting pulled into the home, and there was this idea. Once again, we go back to the problem of investment, right? This is all an investment, and they really do believe that. They really do believe that almost everything that they bought has an incredible amount of value, that it's going to pay off. But it never was going to pay off, because that's stupid. Your collection of dirty wooden chopsticks is not going to be wanted by anybody. But for some reason, they thought every time they bought food, and this is part of the consumer problem that we have today, every time they bought food, if the restaurant gave these boomer idiots something free, like a pair of chopsticks, they would keep it. And now that was an assurance that the food they just bought wasn't just a meal, it was an investment. Because now you have something to sell later. You can give this away. You can use it. You can use it someday. None of them ever did. Almost every boomer who did this, who had this behavior, and there are many, have somewhere in their home a massive, massive baggie full, or a drawer full of nothing but chopsticks. Some of them are from like 1994 or earlier, God forbid. And they're gross, they're disgusting, they're sticky. This is a bit of a bizarre problem with hoarders and boomers especially. It is fascinating to see what happens to the stuff that they hoard, because it never makes any sense that things are as dirty as they are. If I take a perfectly clean pan and I shove it into a box or a bag or a shelf or a cabinet or a pantry, you would expect that perfectly clean pan is going to just stay as it is. But the reality is that as you go through these boomers' things, there's filth over everything. There's a bizarre oil that develops on everything. There are dead bugs, of course, that doesn't help. But dust and grease and it's actually like a combination of those things. And there is this constant rot in boomer life. that settles in almost spiritually, almost spiritually. And it seemed like the more stuff that we collected as the hoarders that we were, we developed even more of this grease. There was this constant nasty grime on everything. And there was a dust tornado that would just run through our home. And it was just devastating to us physically. The worst, one of the worst problems that we had growing up was sleeping. No one could sleep in my house. And the reason was because we were all sick all night. And what was weird was we wouldn't be feeling that way necessarily in the morning or in the afternoon or at night watching TV. But the second that you settled into bed, the second that you tried to go to sleep, we would be beset upon by illnesses. Choking, coughing, sneezing, bizarre fever. We were constantly taking medicine, constantly. There were all these attempted fixes. Once again, the boomer fix is always just to put Band-Aids on everything. Nothing was ever done properly. And again, when your own children are begging you to clean the home, when your own children are begging you to throw things away, to throw away the old toys and the nasty old magazines, and by the way, magazines were probably a massive reason why this happened to us. Because those magazines, I can tell you from personal experience, break down. I actually stopped reading physical magazines because of this, because I used to actually get subscriptions to stuff, and I would like sit there and read them very dutifully, cover to cover, at one time, and I would just it would end up all over my fingers. There would that pulp, that cheap pulp paper, and especially the stuff that they use to make gloss, is horrendous for you, so bad for you. And I don't really know what chemical exactly it is that does that, but I have a feeling that had a lot to do with why things were so dusty. Again, I really do believe that a big part of it is spiritual. I really do believe that. The more that you clean in your home, the more that you clean in your life. They used to say that cleanliness was next to godliness. I do believe that. I think that your and this is like the most Jordan Peterson I'll ever get is, if you have problems in your life and you have physical ailment after physical ailment after physical ailment, I'm telling you right now, clean, and do not stop cleaning until it is done. Everything. Clean, go through every item you have. Throw away talismans, throw away weird emotional connected things that you have. Get rid of those. You have to mourn those. You actually have to psychologically handle those problems, because the likelihood is that there is some kind of spiritual ill that you have. Again, this is a topic for another video, so I'm not going to get too far into it, but that is my advice right off the bat. That doesn't mean, don't go around throwing away other people's stuff, your roommate's stuff or your family's things or whatever. Stick to you. You worry about your room, your space, your areas, and mark them off and make sure. And if those people then start putting stuff into your room, that is an A-okay for you to, once you have a territory, if those people encroach on the territory, you are allowed to throw away whatever they start packing in. That's my opinion. That's my opinion. I'll discuss that another time because I really want to stick to the food problem, because we weren't just sick at night from the dust and the hoard. What we were sick from was our food. We were constantly ill, and a lot of that had to do with the hoard, because hoarders keep things way past their expiration date very much on purpose. But hoarders will also poison their families on purpose. And that's a weird thing to say because, of course, you know, a rational person would say, well, no, they're not. Surely they're not doing this on purpose because, after all, why would they do that? Surely they know that the expiration date makes the thing poisonous. It's just a part of their irrationality. I argue that that's not the case. This is very much on purpose, and the point they're trying to make by poisoning their family is to make the argument that it is okay to keep this stuff, because what they're hoping is that you don't get sick, and then they've won this bizarre argument in their head, right? If you eat food and 90% of the time, even though it's expired and poisonous, you don't get sick, quote unquote, and whatever threshold that means to them, by the way, because sick can be, well, they got a little bit of an upset tummy or they have a stomach ache. That doesn't count, right? Okay, well, that's under the threshold that I made up. And boomers did that all the time. Boomers have very arbitrary rules. This is why it's very difficult to argue with them. It is very difficult to argue with boomers because almost every time what I have found out, way too late. We're talking hundreds of hours of argument in about some problem. And I wish I was joking about that. Hundreds of hours in, you'll learn that they secretly have been using some kind of bizarre, arbitrary goalpost, some kind of boundary in their head that they never told you. And they never told you on purpose, because to them, they believe, and this is a very strange boomerism, and I don't see it in millennials and I don't see it in Zoomers, but they believe that if they don't tell you the boundaries that I'm describing, the secret rules, let's call it just the secret rules that they made up, they think they won the argument, which is, of course, not the case, but this is why a lot of them think that they would make great attorneys. This is also a boomerism that is very funny. A lot of them believe that they would make great attorneys. This is why a lot of them watch things like Law and Order. This is why a lot of them love the show Perry Mason. There was this weird boomer trope where there was like the surprise witness, or they really did believe, and it's so stupid they believe this, but it's true. They really did believe that a court case happened no matter what. And then if you had something secret that got your client off entirely because it proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that they could not possibly have been guilty of the crime, that you go through the entire criminal proceeding only to drop it at the very end. Your Honor, and there, of course, there's like the big scene, right? Your Honor, I present to you evidence 7B, and then they drop it, and the whole courtroom gasps, and it's a picture of your client with a timestamp, and they're actually in Boca Raton and not in Colorado at all, and that means they couldn't have done it. And you held on to your secret evidence this whole time, and then you drop it on everybody. And that's how they think. This was a television trope. You know what? I don't even know if it was a television trope, to be honest. Now that I think about it, I'm not sure how close. I'm not sure that I've ever seen this in a TV show quite this way. I've seen it. I've seen it made fun of. I've seen it parodied. I don't know that I've seen it in a real television show, but that's what these boomers think the law is. They think that, like, you can hold on to evidence. If you really want to watch a boomer start to short circuit, explain the concept of discovery to them. Just sit down and explain the concept that you actually have to drop every piece of evidence you have into the lap of your opposition. And just watch them. I'm not joking. Their eyes will twitch independently of each other. Because I really am giving you like the secret to boomer life and the secret to boomer thinking right now. And I wish more people understood this. I was gonna do a video just to explain this because that's how important it is. I might still do it, or just clip this out or something. But that really is how they think. That really is how they think. So anyway, to get back to the reason I was talking about that in the first place, if a hoarder poisons their family, it is in fact on purpose because they knew it would poison them, but the hope was that it wouldn't. And if they can get away with it, like 6 out of 10 times, 4 out of 10 times, 2 out of 10 times, whatever their secret rules are, and whatever the goalposts are that they made up in their head, even it's probably like, it could be like 1 out of 20 times. If 1 out of 20 times you don't get sick, that is exactly what they were talking about. They were right all along. It's okay to eat expired food. It's okay to feed this to my family. I gave it to you once and you didn't get sick. So that's not what's happening now. Whatever's happening to you now, as you throw up your guts into the toilet, as you spew liquid from both ends, that's an accident because I gave you this before and this didn't happen. As far as I'm concerned, that's on purpose. Okay? Irrational? Sure. Yeah. Mentally ill? Of course. Of course. Many such cases with boomers. But this is how they think, and it is on purpose. It's on purpose to prove a point. To prove a point, by the way, they will never stop trying to prove. That's how sick this is. That's how sick this is. I want to talk a little bit, now that I've talked about the home life, I want to talk a little bit about school, because we were sent to school as millennials, and I do not know what the cafeteria situation looks like at schools now. I can only imagine it's worse than ever. But we were sent to school and ate food that was so horrifying that the biggest problem that the school had was that we were throwing it away completely. Kids would go through the line. We would swipe the card that our parents made sure to keep loaded with money. Mine never did. I had to go through the humiliation ritual every single month of being in debt because my mom would never remember to pay off the card. I don't know what that was, by the way. But I would get in trouble on both ends because my card was always in deficit. And then I would get in trouble with the lunch lady because she's not supposed to swipe my card, but she doesn't want to see me go hungry. So I'm getting yelled at from her. Then I go home and I'm telling my mom again, and now I'm getting in huge trouble with my mom because she's sick of hearing it. Ugh, I can't believe you would bring that up to me again. I know. I don't want to hear about it every day. I know. By the way, we had the money. Okay, we had the money. And frankly, even if we didn't, it's like at that point, just give me a sack lunch. Like, it's cool. And actually, if we didn't have the money, there was actually a version of lunch that you got if you didn't pay, or you couldn't pay. It was considered free lunch. And there were a lot of kids that were on that lunch. And I think if I remember right, and I might not be, that was actually called sack lunch, where like it was some kind of discounted version or something like that. I don't remember exactly. But that was the idea. I think I might be getting that wrong. But for the purposes of our story here, the point of all that was to say there were ways to fix this and not have me go back and forth and be humiliated every day. And I mean, every single damn day, I was so scared. I was so scared to walk up to the lunch lady and swipe my card. It was a real lottery ticket on whether or not you were actually going to get yelled at. It was a humiliation ritual that I'm pretty sure it was on purpose at this point. Unfortunately, again, it could have been this could have been an accident because they really are, as you can tell from the other stories I'm telling you, almost everything they do sucks. So it's kind of hard to say exactly. But beyond the money factor, there was then a problem of the food itself, and our school was going to parents as if they're going to do something about this, by the way, as if the parents are supposed to fix this problem. The school would go to the parents and yell at the parents because they were feeding us such horrid garbage that the kids literally, as hungry as we were, couldn't eat this stuff. It was inedible. We were throwing away entire meals. And to think, here's what you have to consider. Can you imagine a rational person realizing that hungry children were getting their food and were so put off by it, they were dumping it in the trash, and you think in your brain, in your boomer mind, that that's the fault of the child? That the child is simply wasteful? Are you serious? Are you kidding me? And this is just another example of how so many children are just put in situations where they cannot win. They cannot win. And this is why I do have to wonder how much of the millennials and Zoomers ordering out at DoorDash and starting these businesses where they sell very expensive, excellent food. Because that's the thing. This food is usually pretty damn good. Yeah, it's like $40 for a meal, and you're like not getting enough food. But damn, it's good, right? I have to wonder how much of that is a direct result of us just constantly being in a situation where we were eating bad food. It would make sense, right? What would you pay if you live your life, and I know that many of us don't have to imagine this, if you live your life eating bad food at home and getting sick at home and then going to school and eating third world prison food. When you grow up and someone hands you a credit card, what do? You buy food. You buy good food. You never want to eat a struggle meal ever again because you've been doing it since you were like 2. Since you got off Cheerios. The amount of kids who just ate snacks because everything else on the menu was so horrific and would give us like stomach problems. The amount of times that I went to school and my stomach would scream. It would absolutely scream at me. I had nothing but stomach issues my whole life. And in fact, I still do. I'm getting better because, of course, I'm in charge of what I eat now. But it took me a long time to stop eating crap because there was a long time where, like many of these millennials and Zoomers who struggle with DoorDash now, I wouldn't eat anything but fast food or restaurant food. If I had to cook at home, it was extremely simple and, frankly, not very healthy. There was a time where I was eating like really good for like very short periods of time. But it was a struggle to do that. And a lot of that just came from the fact that like, I just couldn't take another bad meal. I went around and psychologically, I just couldn't take it anymore. I could not take even one bite of food that didn't taste delicious was like a spike to the brain because of the way that I was raised, because of this horrifying life that we live as kids. And I hope to God this isn't the case now. I really do. I really hope to God that this was just like a boomer thing And I'm explaining this to people now, and then it goes away. That is my hope, that the cafeterias, the boomers die and the cafeterias mysteriously start making decent stuff. And people are making good food at home. That's really my hope. I really do hope that. Because let me tell you something, if we keep doing this the way that we're doing it, we're just killing ourselves, man. We are. I wouldn't be surprised if I got majorly sick later in life, especially in my intestinal area, because of this problem. Because I was sick a lot as a child, in my bowels and otherwise. And I wonder. I do wonder sometimes. Back to the stories, though. Again, I'm talking about school here, so let's finish that up. When I was at school, if I didn't have a cafeteria lunch, then my mom would give me, obviously, a lunchbox full of food. And this was a nightmare. This was another nightmare. Because no matter how much I begged for my mom to stop making me psycho meals, she would not stop giving me absolute psycho meals. Things that I wouldn't eat. I would come home and get in massive trouble. There was a point where I was trying to throw away a bunch of the food in my lunchbox to pretend like I ate it. So I would like open packages and just dump it into the trash. That worked like 1 or 2 days, and a teacher caught me. And instead of trying to understand what was happening, that the food I was eating was too much, first of all, and it was also disgusting. She just believed that I was being wasteful. This is a boomerism where like kids were just rotten scumbags to them. Everything that a child did was evil, was so evil. That the only reason we would ever do anything was because of an irrational demonism that existed inherently inside of us. And I don't understand it. But this teacher got me in trouble with my parent. They told on me. And they would chase me around to make sure that I was putting my lunchbox back where we put our lunchboxes to go to recess, because that's how it was for us. We would eat lunch together, and then we would like go to recess together. And I was a small kid, and I didn't eat a lot. And my mom would not stop giving me an amount of food that would be a struggle for a full-grown man to eat at a construction site. Now, you might be thinking at this point, well, that's tough to be mad about. She loves you. She wants you to eat well. She wants you to have all the nutrition that you can. And gosh, I get it. As a mom, you surely you want to make sure that your kid is eating. And she at least she loved you enough to give you enough food. But this really was a disgusting amount of food. And then every day what it actually was this bizarre, again, we come back to these humiliation rituals where I had to wait for her to get to my lunchbox, open it up, and gasp. Oh my God, you didn't eat everything in the lunch. Oh my God, what's wrong with you? How come you didn't eat it? You have to be eating this. You have to be eating all of your food. How come you're not? And you could never, as a child, simply explain to a boomer, hey, I never eat the food. I never eat all the food. It's too difficult for me to eat all the food. How about you give me less food? Let's try it and see what happens. Maybe I don't need to eat as much as a construction worker because I'm actually in 4th grade. I'm a small person and can't be spending an entire hour sitting around eating food, because that's what would happen. And I would get in trouble for this too. My mom actually gave me so much food that it took me so long to eat it because I was also a slow eater, which was another problem. And I always have been. I don't know if you want to say like I overchew or something like that. It's funny because it was always considered a wonderful thing. People always, because most kids, they just inhale their food and then they just like burp it up later, or they like, unfortunately, they get sick or something and they get a tummy ache because they basically did not chew their food. Well, I would chew my food and I would chew the heck out of it. And again, you have to understand that like it was also disgusting. I'll get to that in a second. But there was just no sense from boomers that we could be reasoned with, that there were solves to the problem, that there were solutions. There was always this sense that like what they did was perfect. So if the outcome was not perfect, then you were the problem and you needed to be yelled at or punished or pleaded with. I don't know what the purpose of that is, other than it's just sheer narcissism. Boomers have a desire to hurt their kids. I don't know what it is. I don't know where it comes from. I mean, we all know where it comes from. It comes from Satan, but I don't know why they listened. I guess that's what I mean. I don't know why they listened to this. But to get back to the lunchbox, part of the reason why I hated my food so much was because my mom would prepare it in such a way that it was disgusting. And the reason for this in particular came from the fact that she had an overwhelming fear that my food was going to poison me. At this point, you may be wondering, what the hell is going on? Because, like I say, we spent an incredible amount of time in the bathroom when I was a kid, spewing liquid from one side or the other because my mother would poison us with our food. Well, like I say, nothing that the boomers did ever really made any sense, and this is another case of that, because she really was afraid that I was going to get sick from my lunchbox. Now, perhaps what she was really afraid of was being found out, right? Maybe what she was actually afraid of was CPS. I don't know. But to a certain extent, I understand what the complaint was. One of the things that she would give me constantly was, even though I liked peanut butter sandwiches, like many kids did, I actually didn't like PB&J. I actually just liked a straight peanut butter. But which would have been like fine, which would have been plenty. And I really just needed a half. But of course, as usual, she would give me a whole and cause me to spend way more time eating than I needed to. But what she ended up doing was at a certain point deciding that what I really needed was meat. And she liked to give me either corned beef or pastrami. Her fear was that at some point the lunchbox may very well be left in the sun. This was not a real fear. We did not do that, generally speaking. I will say that there were too many places in my school that were hot as hell. This was a bizarre boomer trope that you still see in a lot of the wreckage that is schools and outdoor venues that boomers built. In too many cases, boomers never built shade. I don't know what that was about. I don't know. And they would actually go about like very actively wrecking shade. When I was a kid in my early days at my elementary school, they actually had trees in this grassy area. And for reasons I will never understand, they actually pulled them out on purpose. And what that did was it got rid of the shade. So there was a time when, most of the recess area was just asphalt. It was pure tarmac, which of course is just, in Southern California, is a nightmare. Going to recess was so awful because you were just... there was just sun beating down on you. You would be playing on tarmac, so people inevitably got hurt a lot on that. If you weren't on the tarmac, you were, and by the way, if you weren't on the tarmac, you were on grass, which had the trees, which they pulled out. So now there's nowhere that you can get shade. And when you, and by the way, these were very ugly trees. That was another like bizarre thing about these trees, was how ugly they were and how like twisted and wretched they were. They were weirdly dark, very black trees. Even the leaves I remember, like they weren't green leaves. They were like dark. They were like dark brown and stuff. I swear to you. This is not just me like making this up. And they had a lot of like strange bugs too, by the way. That was another thing. You never saw these bugs anywhere but these trees. But we were also surrounded by chain link fence. And the chain link fence is just so ugly, and it was so high. Now, to a certain extent, we needed it because obviously people are playing with balls on the tarmac, whether it's basketball or foursquare or whatever. And in too many cases, the balls would go over. We really needed a very, 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 very high fence, and that at least I understood. But my God, was it ugly. And the reality is there was no reason for this chain link fence to be just a chain link fence. You could actually have put ivy along it. And they didn't. They never did for any reason at all. They just didn't want to. And it's so ugly. It is so horrific and ugly. So all that is to say that one of the boomerisms that we're still dealing with when it comes to things like infrastructure is the fact that everything is hot as God. It is so hot everywhere you go. I've never understood it. Boomers really like heat. I don't, maybe they're preparing for hell. I don't know. But that was one of the concerns that my mom had, was that like somehow someone was going to take my lunchbox from the classroom, an air-conditioned classroom, and put it out in the heat and then turn all the meat into rot. And then I would open it up and it would be this disgusting, nasty mess. Never happened, wouldn't have happened, impossible. But she wouldn't listen to that. And so her fix for this, once again, we have a boomer fix coming, is to put an ice pack inside of the lunchbox. What the ice pack did, and by the way, she was very happy about the ice pack. The reason that she loved this ice pack was that it was actually a part of it. It like came with the lunchbox. It was like so cool because it was like, ooh, you can keep cool items in here. It was like a very early version of that. Now, of course, we all have like Yeti products and stuff like that, and nobody thinks twice about it. But back then, that was pretty cool. It just didn't work out because you would put this thing in the freezer. You would put it in the lunchbox. And it would turn everything that was soakable soaking wet. And so every time I pulled my sandwich out of my lunchbox, the bread was completely soaked in ice water. Specifically ice water. So it was unbelievably cold. You would be biting into the bread. It was mush. It was so disgusting. And, what I would end up having to do, at one point I was begging my mom to just leave the bread out. If you're going to insist on using the ice pack, please just take the bread off. I don't want the bread. Just give me a wrapped up thing of meat and I'll eat it like that, because that's what I was doing anyway. But she just wouldn't listen. None of these boomers would ever listen to you. They would just go in circles. You would just be in circles with these people, and it was insane. It would go, could you please leave the bread off? Well, if I leave the bread off, then it's not a sandwich. Well, I don't need a sandwich. I just need the meat. I'm not eating the bread anyway. I'm throwing it away at school. You're not allowed to throw it away. The teacher said you shouldn't do that, and you can't do that. I thought the teacher was watching you. How are you getting away with that? I don't see the bread in your lunchbox every time. Well, sometimes I throw it away, and look, I'm just telling you because it's just a waste. Stop wasting the bread. It's disgusting. I'm not going to eat it. You better eat it. And it just kept going around and around and around and around. These people just won't listen. These people won't listen. Everything that you say, everything that you argue is some kind of way to hurt them. And I don't know what that is. That's what they think anyway, is what I mean. So all that is to say that that is what school was to me. Oh, I'll finish this up with this story, because one of the problems that I had, as I told you, is that my mom wouldn't stop dumping food into this lunchbox and then trying to make me eat all of it, and I would get in trouble if I didn't. So I would actually eat the entire recess. So now what was happening was I would sit and eat this disgusting meal that I didn't want, and then I would, because it would take me so long, because she gave me so much of it, I would actually eat through my own recess, right? When everybody else had gone to recess, because there was an expectation that you just got up and went to recess at a certain point because you were finished with your meal. I was the only one in school who didn't have that or who had that problem. And so the teacher would come over and go, "You never go to recess. Why is that?" And I would try to explain to the teacher what was going on. And she just, once again, these boomers don't listen. They don't care. And sure enough, I would get in trouble again. So I was just constantly in trouble with people, because she would come over, this teacher would come over, and I think this might have been the same teacher who caught me throwing stuff away. So she truly not listening, truly uninterested. And she would come over and beg me to stop eating and go to recess every time. And you couldn't win, man. You could never win with these people, ever. I have more thoughts on this, and the reality is, there are more stories I could tell. To be honest, I don't know how much people want to hear of this, because it's so rough. I mean. This is so depressing. I don't really know how much people want to hear, but I'll say this let's get back to the Twitter stuff, because what I'll do is I'll come back to this and tell some more stories at a later time, so that we can all take a break. But I want to talk about the Twitter thing a little bit. The reason I've been telling all these stories is that food, for some reason, has this really, really bizarre effect on boomers, and it is affected deeply by boomers. They find, for some reason, a glee in hurting their children through food. And so when I saw this Twitter battle, it was just another version of that. And one of the things that they kept claiming was that they were just totally pinching pennies the whole time. And what I want to point out is that there was a show that came on during the height of boomer television called Cheers. And I never watched it because I hated it so much, because to me it really was just an extension of boomerism, right? And I hated it, but relatively recently I actually sat down and gave it a shot. And the first couple of seasons were pretty good, and then for some reason they kind of lost this after the Sam and Diane arc. It kind of turned to shit. So I stopped watching it, but I found it so comforting, and it really is another lifetime away. But one of the things I wanted to point out was that this was a show that boomers loved, and it's because it was so damned relatable. And I was talking to a fellow millennial about this at one point, and she made the argument that boomers were penny pinching, and she was sort of being a capo for the boomers for no reason. And I had to point out to her, Cheers was a show that was very popular with boomers, and it is not about socialites who can afford the beer tab coming together and then discussing things that only the intelligentsia cared about. This was a show that was relatable, because these people really did, in many cases, have a place to go where everybody knew your name. That theme song, it rings clear for across generations. It's not just a boomer thing. There is a sense in which we desperately want a place to go and have friends. That's all people are really saying in a lot of these cases on Twitter is like, we just didn't get to have the society that we had, that was built, that was made already. And once again, as usual, the boomers came in and just obliterated it. They obliterated it, and we don't have it anymore. And I just in another video, I've discussed the what restaurants and bars look like right now. That is exactly what's happened. The boomers kind of still get to have their wonderful little bar experience where everybody knows your name. They have their regulars, and they don't want you coming. They don't want millennials and Zoomers showing up. That's very clear. They always look at me with a complete contempt. They hate that when I show up for dinner, they hate that I'm there. That's the reality. They're waiting for me to leave. You can tell, you can feel like I've broken some bond when I come in there, and I don't know what that is. But I have done that. I have done that by coming into their safe space, whatever that is. And honestly, maybe it's just the fact that like they don't want somebody hearing what they consider to be their secrets, you know? Or maybe it's just, maybe, you know what? Maybe I think it's that I'm a reminder at this point. I'm a reminder that there's a world outside of that bar and outside of their homes, and that people exist who don't even know who they are. I think that really bothers them. I think that really, really upsets them. And I think, again, to go back to the food and the control issue, I think that a lot of these boomers will die believing that we as millennials on down are all children, and that they should be allowed to sort of gatekeep our food. It's so strange to say that, because once again, look, you have to believe me, I didn't want to make these videos at all, but the reality is the more that I see this stuff, the more I feel like I need to, for posterity, tell people what happened at some point. Somebody may need to hear, they may need a context, because these demons may come back. The idea that like the boomers are just going to die and then like, that's it. And woo, thank God it's over. That's not going to happen. These people are going to return in some generation. Some demons somewhere, or demons, are going to infest another generation. And this cycle is going to continue. And all they need is for us to forget it ever happened. And that's what I don't want. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about this today. I could go on so much more, but even I get tired hearing these stories, telling them. I know that this is rough. So I'm going to cut it short, because honestly, there's more to say, but I'm going to cut it short. Now, I'll try to lace in some of the other stories that I have with regards to boomers and food in some other videos, so that it's a little less of an impact. But I just wanted to discuss this for the purposes of context.